Yeah.
Hi, everybody. So this is the second part of the sermon for Sunday at Home for May 7th, 2023, if you're trying to find it. And this is somewhat hilarious. I mean, maybe you're not finding it funny, but I am amused because Bruce this morning, I said, this is my last Sunday at home. And he said, oh, don't say that. Something's going to go wrong. And then I said, oh, but that would be so typical because our first 6 months of Sunday at home, something went wrong every single week and we laughed. And even when he said, this is the first time this has ever happened. I've never seen this. It froze. I just said, well, of course, this is so typical. So it felt really, really fitting for me, really accurate and meaningful, and, just exactly what's happening. So I'm just going to give everyone a minute to find their way here. How are we seeing the numbers here, Bruce?
Cheryl has joined us.
Hey, Cheryl. Cheryl's found us again. So Leslie, if you could just put in the comments again to look for the new stream. I'm just going to pick up, and if you're joining us, again, just start at the beginning where the sermon picks off. So I think when we started the Friesen, I was talking about why I don't think considering your legacy is a task of transition. Legacy is a life task. We should be considering our legacy all throughout our lives. But when it gets near the end of your life or a time of change, your legacy ship has kind of already sailed. And that was my last point. And I talked about how a few weeks ago, I was thinking about, what do I want to leave? What do I want to make sure sticks around? What do I want to make sure people keep? And I realized it was too late. That the reality is if I haven't done something in the last 18 years, the ship has kind of sailed. That it's been the 18 years that I've had to leave legacy. And now the transition task is a bit different. Now my task is to just help you process, consider what's going on. And now the task of transition for me and for you in this scenario is to think of what we'll keep. What I'll keep from my time at Mount Hamilton, what you'll keep from my ministry to you. And that's what Jesus was inviting Peter to do. He was saying, do you love me? Do you want to honor me? I want you to think about what you'll keep from me. And don't keep the mistakes. Don't keep the things that don't matter anymore. Keep who I have shaped you to be, which is a ministry of love. What will matter is what you hold on to. And then we can also consider what we let go. Now, we know in a practical way that in times of change, we consider what we want to keep. One very practical example is after someone dies, thinking about what we want to keep from them. I remember when my one grandmother died, I asked to have some of her knitting needles. I still have them. She had taught me how to knit, and even though I haven't knit in 20 years, they remain in a nice little area of keepsakes in my house because they remind me of her. When my grandfather died and they were moving from his house, my grandmother was moving to long-term care, my other grandparents, I asked for a doll, even though I was a grown-up, that I'd always played with in their house. And those are two small things I have. I wanted to keep those things. And you will have those memories in your lives. But there are also things as you come out of different seasons that I've already mentioned that are not material, that you'll want to keep from the people who have shaped your life. After a death or a change or when someone moves on, you might ask, what did they teach you? What were things about your life, their life, that you want to integrate into your life? What will you hold on about who they were and how they shaped you? I have done this with many people who have passed on from MHBC. I talked about this in detail a bit in the fall in a sermon on saints, but just a few examples. I will always pray differently because of how Ann Krampitz taught me the power of prayer. I'm grateful for what Malcolm Curtis taught me about the importance of holding on to history. He wrote our history book, and I appreciate and will carry that legacy. When James Bowick died just a few months ago, I talked in his service, his funeral, about how he taught me the value of lament and facing your death with both hope and sadness and letting there be space for both. I said he taught me how to die well. And now in this time, as we think about what we want to keep in a season of change, it's not just people that we think about what we'll keep, but it's also seasons of our lives. As seasons change, what do we want to hold on to? Now, practically speaking, when I've been packing up my office the last couple of weeks, one thing I took home besides my books, which I own, was Plastic Jesus. Now, some of you will know and be very familiar with Plastic Jesus, and some of you won't. It became a real joke at Mount Hamilton, and this was an MHBC memory. And what happened was that first Easter of lockdown 2020, Leslie and I prepared these gift bags that we delivered to everyone in the church. And a lot of you helped deliver those. And then on Easter Sunday morning, you could open the bag. You know, we were all totally in lockdown. And the first thing that people opened were these plastic eggs that had this little, supposed to be a Jesus figurine inside that we found on Amazon. We just thought they were hilarious. And of course, we were trying to make people smile and bring joy. But we said this, we want you to put this somewhere and remember that Jesus is with you. And it became a thing. And then over the next few weeks, lockdown was still going on. We were meeting exclusively online. We'd hide the little Jesus on the set. We'd put it in different positions and people would look for it. It became a game. And it might seem really goofy. And it's not that when I think about keeping that Jesus, there's something more that I want to keep than that little plastic figure. I want to keep what that figure reminds me that I've learned from MHBC about the value of making faith understandable, about helping people access faith in a way that makes sense to them and is fun and maybe delightful, that we can make space for fun and joy in the midst of hard things, and that we can look for Jesus everywhere. And there's so many other lessons I want to take from MHBC. And I've been thinking a lot about what I'll take with me from this church. And there are so many. Besides that importance of making that space for everyone, understanding where people are coming from, seeing their stories, and helping people consider what it means to see their own part in God's story in a way that is understandable and logical, meeting them where they were. I think about what MHBC has taught me about mission and reaching out. When I joined this church 18 years ago, I was leaving a really trendy, cool church plant in downtown Hamilton. And my friends, we were going to get mission right. I had grown up going to churches that were just about, getting all the right answers and everything clear. And so we had joined this missional church that was doing this radical thing about reaching our community. And so we were doing community barbecues, and we were getting out there and running fun fairs for our neighborhood. And I was like, I'm going to teach MHBC about mission. And that first year or so, we did a couple of those fun fairs. And then I remember going to my old pastor from that church and going, it's taken me a few months to realize that this church, which was a mostly older congregation when I got here, does mission better than our missional, young, so-called cool church. Because in this church, we're a group of people that every week were out volunteering to lead baseball teams they had led for 30 years. They were running community organizations that they had started to bless their neighbors. They knew everyone around them. They knew the names of their neighbors. They knew who they were. They knew this area. They cared about them. And they invited their friends to church. And they talked to them about God. And I was so busy saying, let's throw a fun fair in the parking lot, which was fine. But they taught me about relationships and what it meant to really connect to people. And, when we see how this church has grown, that's always how this church has grown, not through some big, elaborate program, even though those things make a difference, but some friend saying to another friend, let me introduce you to the Jesus I know, because they met them at a yoga class or they got to know them on a school playground. And I learned that here, and I'll take it with me. From Mount Hamilton, I learned the importance of wise leadership and the value of having leaders like our board that will lead with humility and grace, and what a difference that makes in a church when you put politics aside, when you don't operate out of fear of how one person may react or what this one person prefers or that person threatening to take money away. And I grew up like that, and some of you did too. And this church taught me the value of what it really means to look for wise, godly leadership, and I will take it with me. And what about you? In your season of transition, whatever it may be, what do you want to keep? Even if the transition's hard, even if it's something, there's that old saying, from whatever you learn from every situation. Sometimes you learn what you should do, and sometimes you learn what you shouldn't do, what you don't want to be like. Which brings me to that second question of what will you let go? With transition also comes what needs to be left behind to make space for new things. These last couple weeks, I've left a lot of books in this office. I have a lot of books. And my house doesn't have room. I have all this office space with beautiful books. Thank you, Drew Nevin. And I can't take them all. It's okay. And I've been asking what I need to leave. But there's other ways we ask those questions. As a university student, I was part of a church that I loved. But I say this without trying to sound judgmental or harsh, but had some very dysfunctional leadership. And when I left, it was quite painful for me to consider what that meant and to process it. And I remembered thinking about what I wanted to leave behind, to not see that time as a waste, those couple of years I spent in that community, but to ask, what will I learn about what I don't want church to be like? What I will leave behind me about how things I saw that I learned weren't good. And now as I get ready to leave from here, I invite you to consider those questions about what you want to keep from my time in ministry, what I've taught you, which may sound arrogant, but that is a task that you consider. What's something that I'll remember? And what's something I'll let go? And I have my own journey of what I'll let go from here. I've already talked about what I'll keep, and now I'm considering what I leave behind. And now I'm leaving behind my influence on this church going forward. Obviously, I hope there are so many things that you will take from my ministry. And much like David, I'd love to make a list and say, listen, I hope you do this and I hope you do this, but also make sure you do this and also make sure you do this and keep doing that and stop doing this and do this. I'd love to give you a list, but I want to release you today. And I hope any of you listening will remember this. There are so many ministries I've started over 18 years here. There are so many things that have become traditions at MHBC that, to be honest, many of you don't even realize they weren't traditions until I got here. And none of them need to stay when I leave if they're not what God's called you to. Please, do not keep doing something because it honors me. Don't keep doing something because I loved it or because I said it. You're entering a new season. And my role in influence is changing. And we can leave that behind. And it's okay. Now it brings us to the question then, so how do we determine? Whatever our transition is, how do we determine what we'll keep and what we'll leave? Well, this is where I want to look back at David and Solomon and God. David was that first king, that king who wanted to leave so much to Solomon. But God had actually ordained what Solomon needed to take. When David was king, he had a dream that he would build a temple to God. And God came to David in 1 Samuel 7 and said this, "The Lord declares to you that the Lord himself will establish a house for you. When your days are over and you rest with your fathers, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, who will come from your own body, and I will establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever." First Kings, it goes on to say, you know that because, and then we read, and so he says here that Solomon, well, we don't know it's Solomon yet, but he says, your son will build the temple, not you. And then we get to First Kings. In the midst of all the things Solomon's trying to do, exact this revenge that David's given him, Solomon says this in 1 Kings 5, "You know that because of the wars waged against my father David, he could not build a temple of the name of the Lord his God until the Lord put his enemies under his feet. But now the Lord my God has given me rest on every side. I intend therefore to build a temple for the name of the Lord my God, as the Lord told my father David, when he said, 'You whom I will put on the throne in your place will build the temple for my name.'" God determined what Solomon needed to take from David. It was listening to God where Solomon could find what God had next. God never gave Solomon the task of avenging these enemies. God said, the temple, that's what I have for you to carry on. What will you keep from my time here? Well, keep only what God gives you to do. Let go of what was mine. Let go of what is not yours, and seek only what God has for you. And I hope you'll do that in all parts of your life. Let go of what God has not asked of you to carry on. Keep what God gives you as something that should remain. I think of when Jesus left. He had so few words for his disciples. To Peter, he said, "Feed my lambs." And to all his followers, he said, "Go and make disciples of all the world. Make disciples. Feed my sheep. Know how to list. no vendetta, no tasks of the way they had to do it. Keep the message going. Hold on to that. Look for what God has for you. That's our task of transition. Today, for a few moments, I'll invite you to reflect on that. I'm going to put some questions up for you to consider in your life. And the questions are here. What is one loss or change happening in your life right now? I know that you might have so many of them. What is one of them? And as you think of that loss or change, what's one thing you want to keep from the season or person who's gone before? If you're considering someone who's died, what's just even one thing you're like, this is what I want to keep from them. If you're coming to season, what do I want to remember from this season? What did I learn? What will I carry forward? Pause and consider that now, and then I will pray for us. Should we come back? Thank you, everybody. And I hope you'll continue to think of that this week as you face whatever changes may be happening in your life. A couple of announcements as I go. As I've already mentioned, next Sunday is my last Sunday at MHBC as your pastor. And there will be a regular service at 10:30 in person. That service will be all ages. Our kids will stay in because we didn't want to make any of our Sunday school teachers or workers have to miss the service. So we'll keep that a little bit shorter. And then after the service, immediately following, there'll be a bit of a time of farewell. I don't know what that includes. I know there's some treats and some visiting and a little bit of a presentation. So that's what the farewell will look like. Then I really hope, my friends, I'm going to be blunt. Some of you are commenting here and we haven't seen you back. And I'd really like to see you. And you can do it. I know you can. If your health allows you, I really hope you'll come and say goodbye next week. That would be really, really special to me. But if you can't, we will be airing the service live. Sunday at home will go, not Sunday, we won't have Sunday at home, but we'll record our main service live at 10:30 to air. So if you can't join us in person, which I really, really hope you can, then come and you can watch online still. And finally, we want to let you know that there'll be Monday school tomorrow night at 8 p.m. That's via Zoom. And after our in-person service, our chair of our board, Darlene Goodwin, is going to be making an announcement about our interim pastor and who that will be and when they will be starting, as well as some other just general announcements about staff. And so we'll look for an email with an update about that in the next couple of days. And now as we go, let's say these words. We are the church. We are the body of Christ. We are called, we are chosen, we are loved, and we are sent. We go from here to bring God's light to our friends, our homes, and our neighborhoods. Amen.